Bully cuts, black girl's hair locks her in a school stall. She finally fights back like a savage today. I'm going to share a true story about a young black girl who endured relentless humiliation in a school that was supposed to teach her Crestwood High. After you hear what she went through, you'll understand why our approach to educating children must change. This isn't some cautionary fairy tale. It happened within hallways where excellence in action banners hung above polished lockers and administrators turned blind eyes to their richest, most powerful students. Zara Johnson had just moved across town from the rougher east side to Crestwood High, a place known for spotless lawns and parents who wrote big checks. Crestwood's elite crowd kids whose families bankrolled everything from the football team to the auditorium renovations ruled this campus. No one dared cross them. If one of them sneezed in your direction, you'd apologize. On her first morning, Zara's mother dropped her off in a black Honda Civic. The school's circular drive gleamed under the late August sun. SUVs and sedans lined up like luxury showrooms. Zara watched students drift through the entrance designer backpacks slung in half-moon fashion phones, raised for selfies with the school's crest. Her mother offered only a brief nod and drove away without so much as a good luck. Zara stepped onto the concrete and felt every pair of eyes flick to her dark hair and second-hand jacket. She paused to run her finger over the cracked pleather of her backpack strap, then took a steadying breath and walked in. The lobby smelled faintly of lemon-scented cleaner, nothing like the sharp bleach she'd known at her old school. Crestwood's hallways were wide and echoing rows of two-tone blue lockers reflecting fluorescent lights. The silence built like pressure against her ears. In the homeroom, Ms. Park introduced Zara with a smile so tight it looked painted on. "We're thrilled to welcome our newest student," she said, emphasizing newest in a way that set Zara's teeth on edge. The rich kids at the back tables offered cursory nods, but Zara could feel their stares linger. As the first periods blurred past, syllabi name tags whispered speculation, Zara kept her gaze on her notebook and her shoulders squared. At lunch, she carried her tray through the cacophony of cliques. Near the far wall, Ethan Montgomery and his two closest cronies, Marcus Wade and Leo Crawford, lounged like they owned every inch of the cafeteria. They were the trustee's son, the booster's heir, the alumna's favorite respectively, the untouchables. When Ethan glanced up and smirked, Marcus let out a soft whistle. Zara didn't flinch. She'd learned not to. Instead, she chose an empty table at the corner near the exit, her tray balanced in one hand, her head held high, even as she wondered how long she could keep her silence. The next morning, Zara walked the same polished corridor with the same clenched resolve. She told herself that nothing would catch her off guard. Yet before she reached her locker, a heavy backpack swung into her side so forcefully she staggered. She looked up to see Ethan's grin, perfect teeth flashing as he sauntered away. Her books spilled to the floor. She knelt to gather them and kept her face pointed at the linoleum tiles, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. By second period, whispers fluttered around her desk in chemistry. A pen clattered off the tabletop as Marcus Wade flicked it with exaggerated casualness. "Watch it, new kid," he muttered to no one in particular, then chuckled with Leo. Zara didn't raise her head. Instead, she tapped her pencil against her notebook, in a rhythm she knew well, echoes of guard drills back home. At lunch, Zara picked a tray of leftovers and again aimed for the solitary table by the exit. As she settled in, Leo slipped behind her, reached into her backpack, and retrieved her phone. Leaning toward Ms. Park at the serving line, he held it aloft. "Ma'am," he said, voice loud enough that half the cafeteria turned. "I found this in her bag. I think she's been taking pictures of people." A small crowd gathered at the edge of her table. The assistant principal appeared moments later, and Zara felt every eye flicker between her and the gleaming device in his hand. "May I see it?" the assistant principal asked quietly. Leo handed it over with a smirk. The screen was locked, no photos. Zara spoke then, her voice low but firm. "That's not mine." He planted it there. A few students shifted uncomfortably, half believed her, half wanted to see her punished. The assistant principal set the phone aside. "I'll look into it," he said, not meeting her eyes, and walked away. Zara gathered her things in silence and moved to another table on the other side of the room. Later that afternoon, she ducked into the girls' restroom between classes. The tile floor was cool under her feet. She inhaled a deep breath, letting herself collect scattered thoughts. But before she could lock a stall, the door handle rattled and slammed against its frame. Through the crack, Marcus's voice sneered, "Going somewhere." Princess Leo and Ethan appeared at the doorway, and Marcus twisted the lock. The overhead lights flickered. As Zara pounded on the door, they laughed, slipping a small spray bottle of neon green sanitizing foam through the gap. When it hit the floor, the foam expanded, sending out a cloud of pungent scent. Zara coughed, her eyes stinging, and pressed herself against the stall wall. Minutes passed like hours. Somewhere outside, students chatted and lockers clanged, but inside Zara's stall was a stifling capsule of fear and humiliation. She pressed her back against the cool ceramic and fought to control her breathing. Finally, the door clicked. Ms. Park peered in her eyes wide behind thick-rimmed glasses. "Zara, are you okay?" she whispered. Zara pushed open the door and stumbled into her arms. The green foam dripped down her jeans as the assistant principal's silhouette filled the doorway, phone in hand, ready to document the scene. Zara lifted her chin and whispered firmly, "I'm fine," even as her hands trembled. Ms. Park guided her down the hall. "You don't deserve any of this," she murmured. "We'll make sure it stops." Outside that restroom, Zara felt something shift. Not relief exactly, but a strange kind of power. The school for the first time had seen her broken. And she had survived. The bell rang again, echoing down the empty hall as Zara followed Ms. Park toward the main office. She clutched her backpack strap, aware of the damp smear of neon green foam staining her jeans. Other students glanced away, some with pity in their eyes, most with the same wary deference they always gave Crestwood's wealthy athletes. No one had the courage to step between Zara and the trio who tormented her, but now the administration had seen it too. Inside Mr. Donovan's office, the grand mahogany desk and plush chairs felt incongruous with the raw tension in the air. His calm, measured expression contrasted with the after-school chaos still coursing through the building. He offered Zara a seat. "You're safe here," he said softly, then eyed Ms. Park. "Thank you for bringing her." When the door clicked shut, Zara let out the breath she hadn't realized she'd held. "I'm sorry," she whispered, apology for disrupting the day, apology for what they'd put her through. Donovan shook his head. "None of this is your fault. Marcus Wade, Leo Crawford, and Ethan Montgomery. Those three will face consequences. I have their locker footage, and Ms. Park's security report corroborates your account." He tapped a stack of printed pages. "But I need you to help me build the case. Every time they corner you, every insult, every push, write it down. Time, place, exactly what happened." Zara's throat tightened. She'd spent her whole life swallowing her pride, refusing to give her anger an outlet. But something in Donovan's tone let her know she wouldn't be ignored again. She nodded, and he slid a small leather-bound notebook across the desk. "For your notes," he said. "Keep it close, and if you ever need me, you come right here." The next morning, Zara arrived with the notebook tucked into the outer pocket of her backpack. She'd already logged 2 entries: the shoulder check in the hallway and the planted phone incident during lunch. Now, as she made her way to first period, she paused at her locker. Ms. Park had placed a discreet no trespassing sign next to it, one of those little administrative warnings that scream trouble area. Zara met her reflection in the mirror-like locker door, steeled her shoulders and opened it. Chemistry class felt smaller than ever. Marcus sat behind her, breathing just a little too close, elbows grazing her backpack when he leaned forward. Ethan crossed the aisle, smirking at the experiment setup, as though he owned her very seat. Zara wrote down the time, 8:12 a.m., and the offense. "Marcus intentionally knocked my Bunsen burner lighter into my bag. He said it might help me start something." The flame lighter had been shoved beneath her notebooks. She'd felt it press into her back like a challenge. After class, when she emerged chemicals on her fingers, she tucked the notebook away and exhaled. At lunch, she took a deep breath and walked past the usual spot near the exit to sit with a small group from the art club, kind faces, who nodded in greeting but offered no further cover. The trio sat at the far table, arms crossed, watching. The cafeteria staff had begun serving special quiet trays to Zara, a ham sandwich on white bread with no crusts, a bag of chips and apple, intended as comfort food, but it only underscored her isolation. As she knelt to pack away her empty tray, Leo dropped by, arms full of books. He clattered them onto her table, rattling her pencil case to the floor. Zara paused, watched him pick up a charcoal sketch she'd left behind. He traced a finger along its jagged lines, then tossed it to Marcus. "Nice art, freak," Marcus jeered. "You into carving people's faces now?" Zara kept her head down, retrieved her phone to pretend she had a message, then slipped away. That afternoon between classes, she ducked into the student lounge to finish logging her day's entries. The lounge was usually empty, another shelter she'd discovered. Today, though, the lounge door clicked open and Ethan slipped in, phone in hand. He leaned against the table and hit record. "Hey, journaling again," he said, voice loud. "Gonna write about me harassing you? Here, take a picture." He held the phone camera an inch from her face. Zara froze. Her heart pounded so fiercely she could hear it in her ears. "Stop," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Ethan laughed, but before he could press the shutter, Ms. Park's voice crackled over the school PA. All students remaining in the lounge hold position. Security is on its way. Ethan's grin faltered. Ms. Park appeared in the doorway, flanked by 2 campus officers. She met Zara's eyes, and Zara nodded once. Ethan straightened, slammed the phone in his pocket, and stalked out. That evening, when Zara returned home, her mother noticed the deep scratch on her forearm. Before Zara could say anything, her mother put the car in park. "Please tell me what happened," she said softly. Zara swallowed, reached into her backpack for the leather notebook, and showed her mother the entries she'd made: hallway collisions, the stolen phone stunt, the burned foam, the chem lab lighter, the lounge recording. Her mother's eyes glistened. "You're so brave," she whispered, running a hand over the worn cover. "I'm proud of you for writing it down." Zara closed the notebook and exhaled. It was the first time she'd shown someone everything proof in her own handwriting that she hadn't imagined any of it. With each line she'd written, she'd reclaimed a measure of control. The next morning, Zara walked into Crestwood High with less tension in her shoulders. She won't be alone, she thought. There was a network forming already. Ms. Park, Mr. Donovan, and now her mother. And in that small circle, she found the strength to meet the stares head-on. Every time Marcus, Leo, or Ethan tried something new, she'd write it down. And one day, all their privileges wouldn't protect them anymore. The ledger of their cruelty would speak louder than their wealth ever could. That afternoon, the cafeteria felt more like a battlefield than a lunchroom. Zara carried a simple turkey wrap and water bottle to the same corner table, hoping routine would protect her. Instead, Leo and Marcus had deputized a couple of football players to monitor the hall, all paid it seemed in laughs and social currency. As she sat, one of the players dropped his cinnamon roll onto her tray. It landed with a wet smack. Laughter rippled. Zara stared at the roll, then looked up at the trio. Marcus tilted his head. "Fresh cinnamon roll, grab it quick before it's gone," he sneered. 100 eyes tracked her every movement. She picked up the soggy pastry set, it back down, reached for her water, and stood. Without a word, she carried her tray directly to the trash and turned to face them. "You think this is funny?" she asked, voice quiet, but unwavering. No one answered. Ethan's jaw tightened. At that moment, Ms. Park stepped between them, her expression firm. "That's enough," she said, and the football players melted back to their own table, muttering into lunch trays. Marcus glared at Zara, but his smirk flickered. Ms. Park guided Zara away. Later in art class, Zara placed her sketchbook on the table, only to find the pages damp and smeared. Someone had spilled her water bottle directly onto her charcoal study. She lifted the ruined sketches and the notebook she'd been keeping now, damp at the edges. The art teacher, Mr. Henley, frowned when he saw her work ruined. "Restoration is part of the process," he said, handing her a clean pad. But his apology felt hollow. Between classes, Zara unlocked her locker to find the same trio had stuffed it full of crumpled papers with the words "thief" scrawled in big, uneven letters. She sank to her knees in the hallway, gathered the papers, stuffed them into her notebook, and closed the door firmly. A few students passed by, some glancing at the locker sign Ms. Park had hung earlier, "Do Not Disturb," investigating harassment, but no one stopped to help. That evening, she met with Mr. Donovan in his office. He studied the wet sketchbook pages and the locker paper, then looked up with resolve. "They're escalating," he said. "I've arranged for security cameras in the cafeteria corner and updated the schedule so a staff member supervises lunchtime there. As for your sketchbook, take it to the art room before school tomorrow. We'll keep it locked when you're not using it." Zara nodded, closing her notebook. In those 2 simple plans, a camera angle adjustment, a locked storage shelf. She felt a glimmer of relief. The school was finally matching her determination with real action. She walked out of his office holding her notebook tight, knowing that every new entry of cruelty would now be met with a measure of accountability. And with that, she felt a measure of power returning page by page. The following morning, Zara arrived early, slipping into the art room before anyone else. She set her belongings on a far table, placed her sketchbook in a locked cabinet Mr. Henley had installed, then took a seat near the window with her chemistry notes spread out. For the first time in weeks, she could focus on something other than who would corner her next. But the silence of protected space only amplified the sense of being watched. As she sketched reaction mechanisms, she caught movement out of the corner of her eye, Marcus stepping around the row of easels, Leo lingering by the supply cart. Ethan hovered at the door, phone in hand. They smiled at one another as though sharing a secret. Zara's heart sank. They'd been forced to pull back in the cafeteria, but here in the place she felt safest. They were testing their limits again. She closed her eyes for a moment, turned to her notes, and wrote in the margin of her notebook, Art room surveillance installed 2 cameras northeast and southwest corners. When the class began, Mr. Henley announced a free sketch period. Feel free to work on any piece, he said, and remember to sign out any supplies you use. As he walked to greet a student at the front, Leo seized the moment. He picked up a pair of school-issued scissors, then sauntered behind Zara's easel. Before she realized what was happening, she felt a sharp tug at the nape of her neck. Her thick braid slipped through her fingers like rope through a pulley. She froze. A faint whipping sound followed by the soft thunk of scissors being folded shut. She reached up, caught the blunt ends of her braid in her hand. A cold jolt shot through her scalp. Around her, the room fell into a pin-drop hush. Every brushstroke, every shuffling foot, every shallow breath hung in the air as though time itself were watching. Zara turned slowly, not to scream or to plead, but to look directly at Leo. His face was white eyes wide with sudden realization. Ethan ducked his head in embarrassment. Marcus grinned, the smirk frozen half-formed on his lips. The faint hum of the projector overhead sounded impossibly loud. Then a voice, "What is going on here?" Mr. Henley stood at the front, eyes darting between them. Leo Crawford put those down and stepped away from Ms. Johnson. Leo took a step back, clutching the scissors like a guilty trophy. Zara held her braid in one hand, the severed edge blunt and jagged. She did not cry, she did not tremble. She stood taller, chin-lifted gaze, unwavering. "Not my hair?" Her voice was steady. "You don't get to cut me." The words crackled through the silence. Leo swallowed, looked to Marcus for rescue. Marcus avoided his eyes. Ethan fumbled for words. It was just Leo began, but Mr. Henley held up a hand. "Ms. Johnson, are you all right?" Zara nodded, fingers tightening around the braid. Mr. Henley took a step forward, then cleared his throat. "Security!" he called into his walkie voice, controlled. "Art room incident, immediate assistance." He turned back to Zara. "Do you want me to call the office?" She shook her head. "No, I'll go." The room murmured, chairs scraping against linoleum. Mr. Henley stepped aside. Zara walked past him, past Leo, past the cluster of stunned classmates, and down the hall toward the main office. She did not run. She did not sob. She walked deliberately, her braid swinging like a silent statement of defiance. By the time she reached Mr. Donovan's door, school officers flanked the corridor, murmuring over radios. He opened the door before she knocked. On his desk lay a printout of the cafeteria footage, a new warning sign taped beside it, "Art room cameras active." He motioned for her to sit. Zara placed her braid on the desk. It looked small there, an artifact of cruelty. "They cut my hair," she said. Again. Donovan nodded, his expression unshakable. "I've reviewed the footage," he said, "and Ms. Park's locker camera shows them later discussing what colors to dye it. That's assault and planned harassment." He slid across 2 pages the supply log, showing scissors signed out by Leo and time-stamped images of the incident. "I'm suspending them immediately. You'll be reinstated first thing tomorrow. I'll handle the press release." Zara's shoulders finally relaxed. She took a breath, cool, measured. "Thank you," she said simply. In her mind, she erased the fear that had tightened her chest. The ledger of their cruelty would speak louder than their wealth ever could. And this time, their privileges wouldn't protect them. The next morning, when Zara stepped through Crestwood's front doors, the air felt different, heavier, but in a way that pulsed with possibility. The usual hum of students chatting and locker doors clanging was muted by intent eyes that tracked her progress. She moved with purpose, backpack slung over one shoulder, braid neatly tucked into a loose bun. No one reached out to touch it. In the cafeteria, a small crowd had gathered near the entrance. A local journalist from the Crestwood Gazette stood behind a cluster of cameras, her microphone emblazoned with a logo. As Zara passed, the reporter called her name. For a moment, Zara hesitated should she answer. She remembered Mr. Donovan's reassurance. "You don't have to say anything if you're not ready." So, she simply nodded and continued to her usual table. No cinnamon rolls this time, just her lunch, and the quiet reclaiming of her space. Throughout first period, pages of newsprint rustled through the halls. The Gazette's front page headline read, "Student harassed twice in 2 weeks. School takes stand." Inside an editorial, praised Zara's courage and Crestwood's decisive action. Zara saw Ms. Park's proud nod when she slid a copy into her locker. Even the seniors, usually so aloof, paused to offer a thumbs up as she walked by. After lunch, a small group of girls from the art club approached Zara in the hallway. One of them, Natalie, handed her a folded piece of paper. "We started something," Natalie whispered. "A committee. We're calling it Speak Up. Anyone who sees harassment files a quick report, no names needed." "You inspired us." Zara's heart warmed as she unfolded the flyer. Neat bullet points contact info for Ms. Park and Mr. Donovan, a promise of solidarity. In fourth period, Zara returned to the art room. The braid sat on the teacher's desk, preserved in a small display box labeled Exhibit A. Mr. Henley was finishing a lesson on narrative art when he gestured toward the box. "This belongs to you," he said quietly. "We're going to use it in class to talk about power, voice, and protection." The entire room was silent. Students listening, some ashamed, most reflective. By the end of the day, Crestwood's administration had posted a new policy on the school website. Zero tolerance for harassment, all reports to be investigated within 24 hours. An official letter went home to every family signed by Mr. Donovan and the district superintendent, outlining mandatory workshops on empathy and respect, starting next week. As the final bell rang, Zara lingered at her locker. She flipped through her leather-bound notebook pages filled with dates, times, descriptions, and sketches that told the story of her fight to be seen. She closed it with a decisive snap and slipped it into her backpack. Walking out into the golden afternoon light, she realized this chapter would close soon. Not because the school's troubles were solved forever, but because pride and persistence had carved a path for change. And for the first time since arriving at Crestwood High, Zara felt what it was to belong. The weeks that followed Zara's reinstatement felt charged with something new, a cautious optimism that had been absent from Crestwood High for too long. On a crisp Friday afternoon, the auditorium buzzed with an unusual tension. Rows of folding chairs held parents, teachers, and students alike, all gathered for a special meeting called by the district superintendent. At the front of the stage, a long table was draped in a navy cloth, nameplates lined up for each board member, and a single spotlight hovered over an empty podium. Zara stood near the back, clutching her leather-bound notebook, its edges worn from countless entries. When the superintendent walked out and introduced the evening's agenda, a review of harassment policies and school culture at Crestwood, the hush that fell over the crowd felt almost sacred. He opened with an apology, acknowledging that for too long, the school had prioritized reputation and donor satisfaction over student safety and dignity. He detailed the steps already taken. Rapid response protocols for harassment reports, expanded security camera coverage, mandatory empathy workshops for every student, and clear disciplinary guidelines that could no longer be circumvented by wealth or influence. Then he turned the microphone to Zara. As she stepped into the spotlight, a ripple ran through the audience. Her braid, once severed and displayed in Exhibit A, had been removed from its glass case and returned to her side. Now it lay tucked inside her notebook, a quiet testament to how far she'd traveled. She stood tall, shoulders squared, and looked out at a sea of faces, some hopeful, some hesitant, and others ready to challenge their assumptions. "I'm not here to rehash every moment of pain," she began, her voice steady. "You've heard about the foam in the restroom and the planted phone and the cafeteria wars. You know how I kept a ledger of every shove, every insult, and every violation of my dignity. But tonight isn't about me. It's about what happens when a system fails you and how a community can learn to protect the very students it was meant to serve." She paused, letting her gaze sweep the room. "When they cut my hair for the second time, I realized something: brutality can be accidental. But indifference is always a choice. Each one of you here tonight, I'm asking you to choose differently." She closed her notebook with a soft snap. This school can't just punish wrongdoing. It has to prevent it, detect it, and support those who speak out. That means your voices matter. Even if you're not the one targeted today, what you see and what you say could save someone else tomorrow. Her final words landed like stones in still water. Justice that comes only after tragedy is too little too late. Let's build something stronger, an environment where respect is as mandatory as math and compassion is as standard as chemistry. A moment of stunned silence followed, then applause broke out, light at first, then building to a standing ovation. Zara stepped back from the podium, her heart pounding not from fear, but from a fierce sense of purpose. After the meeting, parents and teachers formed small clusters, talking earnestly. Some wiped tears from their eyes. Others exchanged determined nods. A handful of the football players, who had once blocked her path, approached Ms. Park and Zara with tentative apologies and questions about how to get involved in the new student guardian program. Even Ethan offered a handshake, his voice low. "I'm sorry, Zara. I want to help fix this." She accepted, not with hostility, but with the quiet grace she'd honed over weeks of confrontation and resilience. In the days that followed, Crestwood High felt different. Hallways still reverberated with lockers and laughter, but there was a new undercurrent of vigilance. The art club's Speak Up committee had swelled to nearly 50 students, collecting reports of bullying and hosting lunchtime forums on microaggressions and allyship. the chemistry teachers integrated short empathy exercises into their labs, asking student partners to reflect on respect before they measured reagents. Even the cafeteria menu boards carried digital reminders, kindness first, and report harassment. Anytime, anywhere. At home, Zara's parents noticed another shift. Dinner conversations flowed naturally now, with her father asking detailed questions about her day, and her mother offering hugs without knowing all the details. One evening, Zara's mother reached across the table to grasp her daughter's hand. "Your courage changed things," she said softly. "You did more than anyone expected." Zara squeezed her mother's fingers and smiled a small, genuine expression that spoke of relief and hope. A month later, Zara sat at her locker before her final exam, the sun's late afternoon rays dancing across her books. She ran her fingers over the notebook's leather cover, now bulging with entries of change rather than only cruelty. Opening it, she read the very first line she had written weeks ago under Mr. Donovan's guidance. 8:12 a.m. hallway. Marcus Wade intentionally knocks my lighter into my bag to start something. Beneath it, she added a new entry, 4:15 p.m. auditorium board. Adopts zero-tolerance policies and student-first initiatives. Community commits to vigilance and empathy. She snapped the notebook shut and slid it into her backpack, her braid tucked neatly behind her ear. Choosing her usual route, she passed the art room, where the display case was empty, a temporary removal meant to signify healing rather than spectacle. Mr. Henley waved from the doorway, holding a fresh canvas, ready for next semester's student showcase. Zara nodded in acknowledgement and continued down the corridor. As she walked home that afternoon, the same neighborhood streets she once feared now felt familiar, as though each step carried the weight of what she had accomplished. She passed the corner store where Darius, her cousin, often waited for her after practice. This time, he was there with 2 gloves slung over his shoulders, a silent offer to spar and to let out any last vestiges of frustration. Zara smiled and joined him in the ring, set up on the concrete driveway, the late light casting long shadows as they moved through their drills. When she returned home later, the Creston Gazette lay open on the kitchen counter, a follow-up article visible Crestwood's New Era, Harassment 24-Hour Response, lives up to its promise. The byline read, by Lena Mercer, with contributions from Zara Johnson. Zara picked up the paper, read her own words quoted under the headline, and folded it with care. She placed it on the shelf next to her journal, the braid in its box, now accompanied by a framed certificate from the district for bravery and service to student welfare. In her room, she gazed out the window at the evening sky, shades of violet and gold merging. The year had brought nightmares she never anticipated, but it had also given her a voice that could not be silenced. She settled at her desk, opened a fresh page in her notebook, and began to write the first lines of a new story, one where the next protagonist would discover that speaking up could ignite change far beyond the walls of Crestwood High. The first weeks of the new semester carried a different rhythm through Crestwood's corridors. Students who once scoffed at the harassment policies now paused at the Speak Up posters, bright visuals pinned beside every water fountain, every set of lockers. Zara walked past one as she made her way to the auditorium for a leadership workshop. Noting the list of hotline numbers and text codes for anonymous reporting, a small smile tugged at her lips. This was the legacy she had helped create. At the workshop, she found Natalie and 2 other art club members already seated near the front. They greeted her with quiet enthusiasm. A facilitator from the district stepped onto the stage and invited students to share recent experiences, good and bad, in a circle of trust. When Natalie described how her friend had used the hotline to stop a rumor mill in its tracks, the group nodded solemnly. When another student recounted a positive intervention in the chemistry lab, the room broke into gentle applause. Zara realized this gathering was more than a mandatory exercise. It was the heartbeat of an evolving culture. After the session, Zara lingered in the empty auditorium under the clouds of stage lights. A freshman approached, clutching a sketch pad. "Are you Zara?" she asked, voice trembling. When Zara nodded, the girl whispered, "Thank you for everything. I was afraid to come here. Now I know I don't have to face it alone." Zara remembered her own first days, every hallway a threat, every glance a challenge. She offered a gentle smile and guided the girl to Natalie, who would help her join the art club. It felt strange to be on this side of the equation, but it felt right. In the days that followed, Zara noticed subtle shifts everywhere. Mr. Henley assigned a collaborative mural project about dignity and respect, painting a giant phoenix rising from broken chains. Chemistry classes began each period with the respect protocol, a 2-minute round of positive affirmations between partners before experiments. Even the football team, once complicit in the harassment ring, held a fundraiser for a local anti-bullying nonprofit selling wristbands with the slogan, "Crestwood Cares." At home, Zara's parents sometimes remarked on how light she seemed. No more hypervigilance, no more nights of restless dreams, replaying any of her worst moments. Instead, she talked about curricular changes, student initiatives, and the occasional bureaucratic hiccup. They listened with pride, marveling at how a fraught year had forged her into a young leader. One afternoon, as she organized supplies in the art room, Mr. Henley presented her with a small wooden plaque carved with the words, "In recognition of a student whose courage sparked a community's conscience." He insisted she accept it for the entire student body, then hung it near the door so every visitor would see it. Zara touched the carved letters and felt a swell of humility. It wasn't about her. It was about the many voices that had united to demand change. By the end of the semester, Crestwood High had reported a dramatic drop in harassment incidents. The district's independent review praised the school's swift policy updates and student-led culture shift. Articles in regional education journals showcased Crestwood as a model for proactive intervention, proof that when students, teachers, and administrators work together, zero tolerance can be more than a slogan. On graduation day, Zara stood among her classmates in cap and gown, a stark tassel swinging beside her braid, now grown back thick and unbroken. When her name was called, she walked to the stage to accept her diploma. The crowd rose in applause as she paused to look across the sea of faces, friends she'd met and speak-up teammates from art club faculty who'd stood by her. In that moment, she understood that her voice, once silenced by cruelty, had become the catalyst for a safer, more compassionate community. Later gathered with friends beneath a bright spring sky, Zara opened her notebook one last time. The pages chronicled her journey from the earliest shoves in the hallway to the boardroom speech that changed policy. At the final blank page, she wrote a single line. "This is not the end. It's the beginning of a legacy." She snapped the book shut, tucked it into her backpack, and joined her classmates in tossing their caps skyward. As the mortarboards spun like white doves into the clear air, Zara felt the weight of fear lift completely. A new chapter awaited, one she and Crestwood High would write together, guided by the firm belief that every story of mistreatment could be met with equal measures of courage and solidarity. A year later, Crestwood High's hallways felt familiar, but not stagnant. New freshmen fanned into the building on orientations day, eyes wide with anticipation and just a hint of the anxiety Zara once carried. She walked among them now as a guest speaker and mentor for the Speak Up Leadership program, her braid woven into a loose ponytail that brushed her collarbone. Students recognized her immediately, many offering shy waves as they passed the respect protocol signage she'd helped design. In the auditorium, she stood at the same podium where she'd once challenged the district superintendent. Behind her, the navy cloth-draped table remained, though the lineup of nameplates had changed. When the intercom announced, "Welcome to orientation class of 27, the crowd settled into an expectant hush. Eyes tracked Zara as she began. "I remember standing here under brighter lights filled with fear and determination. Today I'm here not as a survivor, but as someone who believes deeply in this community's power to protect every one of you." She spoke about the Speak Up hotline, now staffed around the clock by trained peer counselors. She described how anonymity had emboldened students to report everything from whispered rumors to physical intimidation before they escalated. She shared data, a 75% reduction in recorded harassment incidents over the past year, and a doubling of positive peer interventions reported in every department from art to physics. Murmurs of approval rippled through the room. After her speech, small groups gathered for breakout sessions. Zara led one entitled From Ledger to Legacy, where she guided participants through the process of documenting concerns and turning them into actionable reports. She distributed blank notebooks, each labeled with a phoenix emblem, and encouraged students to write not only what they had witnessed, but what they would do to make Crestwood a place where respect came first. Outside the classroom, an enthusiastic sophomore named Jamal approached her brandishing a sketch he'd made of the mural Phoenix Rising. "This is my tribute to what you started," he said. The mural now adorned a long corridor near the art wing, a soaring bird painted in bold reds and golds against a backdrop of fractured chains. Zara studied his lines, clean, confident strokes, and nodded. "You've captured the spirit," she told him. "Keep nurturing it." He beamed, and she watched him walk away with purposeful strides. By midday, she slipped into the cafeteria, where the usual lunchtime buzz echoed. Instead of sneaky lunchbox sabotage, she saw small clusters of students practicing role-play exercises on intervention. One group offering gentle but firm ways to diffuse conflict, Another teaching de-escalation techniques learned from a recent seminar led by a local counselor. The corner table reserved for peer mentors held fresh posters, "Speak Up, We're Listening," and a tablet displaying a live feed of cafeteria camera angles, monitored by the student-run tech committee. Later that afternoon, Zara met with Mr. Donovan in his now slightly smaller office. He'd been promoted to District Director of Student Welfare. The framed zero-tolerance resolution hung proudly behind his desk, alongside photos of him shaking hands with the district superintendent. He greeted her with a wide smile and a handshake. "The board wants to expand this program district-wide," he said. "They're asking for your input on the rollout plan." Zara absorbed the weight of that moment, the ripple effect of her persistence. "I'll draft a proposal," she said, already thinking through curriculum integration, peer-led training modules, and community partnerships with local youth organizations. Donovan slid a fresh copy of the proposal template across the desk. "Make it your own," he encouraged. Walking home later, Zara reflected on how far the school had come from the day she first walked those polished floors as a terrified freshman. The same banners, "Excellence in Action," felt less ornamental now. They were a challenge the entire community had chosen to meet. She passed a group of underclassmen clustering around a Speak Up kiosk at the main entrance, furiously tapping on the tablet to record a new tip. She paused for a moment to watch them interact with the system she'd helped build. That evening, she sat on her porch steps with her leather-bound notebook. It was no longer a ledger of cruelty, but a chronicle of change, pages filled with anecdotes of students stepping up for one another, reports leading to swift staff intervention, and even faculty members who had adopted restorative practices in their classrooms. She opened to a recent entry orientation. 150 students signed up as peer mentors in one day. Heart of the community beating strong, zipping the notebook shut, she felt a quiet pride that tempered the memory of pain. Her story had been a catalyst, but it was the countless voices she'd inspired that truly transformed Crestwood. As the sky deepened to dusk, she envisioned the next chapter, expanding the program across the district, mentoring new cohorts, and ensuring every student understood that speaking up was not an act of defiance, but an expression of care. And with that vision settled in her mind, Zara stood and carried the notebook inside, a faithful companion for the work that still lay ahead. The journey that began with a ledger of harassment had become a blueprint for empowerment, and for once the future felt brighter than any obstacle she might encounter. Months into the district-wide rollout, Crestwood's model became the blueprint for 3 neighboring high schools. Zara, now a junior in college classes through a dual enrollment program, returned periodically to train student leaders and counselors. When she stepped back onto Crestwood's polished floors, her presence carried an easy confidence that replaced the tight vigilance of her freshman days. On a crisp Saturday morning, she led a workshop in the library's tech lab, guiding pairs of students through a simulation, responding in real time to reports filed on an app developed by their peers. Across the room, a hush fell as screens flashed incident notifications prompting role-played interventions. One student quietly demonstrated how to offer de-escalation, "I'm here to help. Let's step aside and talk," while another practiced redirecting a harasser with firm boundaries. Zara moved between tables, offering encouragement, pausing to note particularly thoughtful phrasing in her leather-bound notebook. After the simulation, a discussion circle formed around the large oak table. A sophomore named Elena shared how she'd used the hotline to stop an embarrassing rumor before it spread to social media. A junior, Marcus Wright, spoke about confronting his own friends when he saw them mocking a freshman's clothes. "I never imagined calling out my buddies would feel so necessary," he admitted. The room nodded in solidarity. This was no longer unusual. It was expected behavior in a community committed to mutual respect. Later, in a meeting with the district superintendent and school board members, Zara presented a series of recommended enhancements: integration of empathy exercises into every core subject, quarterly reviews of incident data by a joint student-staff committee, and partnerships with local nonprofits to provide on-site counseling. Her proposal included an annual culture audit, where student leaders would anonymously survey their peers on campus climate. As she spoke, board members leaned forward, taking notes, exchanging approving glances. This was the level of engagement she'd always hoped for. Back in her senior year at Crestwood, Zara balanced her leadership roles with advanced placement courses and college application essays. She no longer hid her braid, but wore it proudly, often tied with a small ribbon in Crestwood's navy and gold. The art room's mural Phoenix Rising underwent a small makeover with new layers of paint added each year to reflect ongoing student contributions. The current senior class had inscribed a quote around the edge: "We are the authors of our school's story, and each word matters." As graduation neared once more, Zara found herself not in the audience this time, but at the podium. The guest speaker had called in, sick, leaving an unexpected opening. With Mr. Donovan's encouragement and the superintendent's blessing, Zara prepared a speech not about her journey, but about the next chapter for Crestwood and beyond. She began. When I first walked these halls, I counted every look and every whisper as an accusation. Now, I see that every glance can be an invitation to learn, to listen, to protect. Today you'll leave this place not only with diplomas, but with a pledge to speak up when it's hard to stand firm, when it's easier to stay quiet, and to remember that dignity is not just personal, but collective. Her words rippled through the auditorium, weaving together years of policy changes, personal growth, and shared responsibility. When the final bell rang at the end of commencement, hats flew into the sky once more, only this time they carried the sense of a promise fulfilled and one still unfolding. As the new graduates stepped across the stage, Zara lingered with her notebook in hand. She watched them depart, some headed to college, others into the workforce or military, each armed with the knowledge that they inherited a community strengthened by courage and collaboration. Turning to leave, Zara tucked her braid behind her ear and opened her notebook one last time. There on the final blank page she wrote, "Legacy is not what remains, but what moves forward." With that last line, she closed the book and walked out into the future. She'd helped create a future where every student would know that their voice, once silenced, could become the spark that lights an entire district.